Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent. Line's good. Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Oh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham Scott, alongside, as always, hello, Scott.
Ooh, hi, Sean.
How you doing, buddy?
Oh boy, I'm. I had a long sleep yesterday. We're recording this Monday.
Yeah.
And Sean, I didn't tell you this, but I took the day off today.
Okay. Wow.
I said, you know what? I've been going stem to stern with the Brier, the Scotties before that. Just need a little time, little me time.
But then the week before that, you took off.
Well, listen, we all don't have the stamina that you have, Sean. I'm a little bit older, and so
right, yeah,
I needed a day. Slept in a bit, tootled around, did a few errands.
Okay, what was your big errand? What was the big thing you accomplished on your day off?
So, Sean, I have not owned a printer since I was in university, and I bought a printer today.
Wow.
So I went to pick that up.
Nice. You're going to do some printing.
Yeah, so I can send some stuff back.
That's why you bought it, because you had to return online orders that you didn't have return slips for?
Yes, mainly.
So this isn't a work-related purchase. This is a purely personal...
It is, yes.
Okay. Did you buy the printer that Shaq has been advertising throughout the curling?
You know what? I thought of that.
Yeah.
But I still don't like ink, so no ink.
Okay. So
I went laser.
All right. So we'll have to remember that when we do our curling ads podcast this year, that one did not work on you.
Maybe it made me want to buy a printer subconsciously.
Maybe.
But no inkjet printer for me. Black and white, that's all I need.
All right. So exciting news from the world of Scot as we enter year 2 of COVID-19 living here in Ottawa. March 13th was the day here where things really shut down. I know it was different days. Everywhere March 11 was big in certain places. So we noted that over the weekend as we watched the end of the 2021 Brier, which of course played in the bubble because of COVID-19. Scott, it was a long week. It was a fun week. I remember that the time change has happened during the Brier before, but I was very appreciative of no tiebreakers because we didn't have that Sunday morning game to have to get up for with the time zone. The springtime change, of course, everyone always thinks about, oh, Saskatchewan would be nice right now. And then in the fall one, we're like, Saskatchewan misses out on this. So most of the country, of course, jumping ahead an hour into daylight saving time. And the first day of daylight saving time, Scott, fourth time is a charm for Brendan Bottcher and his rink out of Alberta, out of the Saville Centre, finally breaking through for his first Brier championship. The whole team with their first Brier championship in a win over Kevin Cooey on Sunday night. Scott, what did you think of the game? And what do you think of Brendan Bottcher as your Brier champion?
Well, Sean, I'm not going to, make any huge news waves here when I say, I'm pretty happy for these guys that, they've been working so long and for so hard, or working so hard for so long.
Yeah.
Boy, it's maybe another day off. We're all happy that they've finally broken through. Some of us wanted to see them go full Buffalo Bills, but as a Bills fan, I'm glad they didn't. And so I'm happy for them there. When it comes to the game, I think that it was very well played. And there was one unfortunate pick.
Yeah.
That really changed the game.
Yeah. And so in that game, it's really nip and tuck the entire way through. And we see in the seventh end, well, actually, so early in the game, pretty open, both teams feeling each other out. The third end, Bottcher plays it a little more aggressively. They get their force in the third end. They're full fare for that force in the third end. And then we get a little bit of mixing it up through those middle ends, but again, still very tentative. And then the seventh end, Kevin Cooey's first one picks. Brendan Bottcher was set up for a deuce here.
Yes.
In this end. And the pick gets him the third point. And it is a very unfortunate time for a pick. And this was a real pick. This wasn't one of those picks where we make fun of the teams for saying, oh, they made a pick when they really just missed the shot. Like, this was an actual pick, which you never like to see, especially in a big spot like that. And then Bottcher's able to come back and get a force in 8. So he's up 3-2 with the hammer going to the ninth end and really in control of that game.
Yeah. That's part of the problem with being okay with taking blanks, right? Is that you can't dig yourself out of something like that should it come up.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, praising the strategy of, oh, well, if we just blank until the end, we'll score a point with hammer and we'll win.
You got to be perfect.
You got to be so good. And like we saw all week, these guys are really good. But if a mistake happens and that's the way you're playing, you don't have the chance to come back. We talked about this on our show during the week when it related to Jason Gunnlaugson. Like, he got shut out in a game.
Yeah.
He was content to take blanks. And then when it was time for him to score, he missed. And that sort of was the whole game, right? It all comes down then to one shot. And yes, they're making shots for the blanks, of course. But it does mean you have to be so precise and so good and dialed in the whole time. And you have to assume that the ice is perfect and your sweepers are perfect. And it's just a lot, I think. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it is a challenging strategy because the other team is wanting to push you and force you and mix it up a little bit, that they're not going to let that go for the whole game. That is what we saw in the Gunnlaugson game where he did get shut out, where sure, the other team is willing to go along with it for a while, but eventually they're going to start pushing you and up the degree of difficulty. And if you're defensive the whole time, it's really hard to get those blanks or be put in a position then where either you're going to be forced or just give up a steal, which is what happened to Gunnlaugson. And it does create this idea of, you do have to go at some point because these other teams are too good to let you sit back and just carry the hammer to the end of the game. Now, that's not exactly what happened here because Bottcher had the hammer and he went for it in the seventh end, right?
Yes.
So it kind of worked out for him that he was able to blank 4 through 6 when he had the hammer. And then again, that on its own doesn't decide the game. The force in 8 is huge. And then in the ninth end, I thought this was, to me, the most interesting part of the game was the ninth end where Bottcher has the hammer back again. And there's a long discussion on Cooey's shots where Brendan Bottcher has one sort of back 4-foot and another one that is locked on at the top 12-foot. And there's a Cooey stone or 2 Cooey stones kind of on top of it, one of which is frozen. And there's a long discussion for the Cooey team of what do we want to do here? What is the play for us? And do we try to steal? Because their fear was that he'll give us one and we'll be tied without coming home. They thought about, well, can we do something that almost forces him into one potentially? And that's the situation that Cooey wanted. He wanted to be down 2 with. And that discussion I found so fascinating. We've seen Cooey give up steals in ninth ends before intentionally to be down 2 with the hammer. Seems like that's what they were going for there. He kind of missed his shot by an inch. Brendan Bottcher had a double back to potentially score the 2. He just got it a little too thin and rolled out and got the 1. But that again was another example of you're really walking this razor's edge when you're not scoring points.
Absolutely. That's another great example, right? Bottcher seemed really keened up, really geeked up to throw that shot in 9.
It was a game-winning shot
because
he would have won.
Well, that's it. I think in his mind, he was like, I make the shot, I win the Brier, not the game. I win the Brier. I've lost 3 in a row.
Yeah.
I make this simple shot. I win the Brier. You push out a little hard, right?
Yep.
Sure, that's going to happen. But for him to then regroup and play the 10th end the way that they did was very, very, very impressive. But before we get there, Sean, let's talk about 8.
Sure.
Let's talk about Cooey's shot to take 1 in the 8th end.
Okay.
This was a double that he somehow over curled and squeezed the rock forward.
Yeah.
While still making the double.
Uh-huh.
Did you think that shot was there?
No, not in a million years. I don't think there's another player in the world. And we were talking about this in our group chat with Rocks Across the Pond. Maybe Nicodine, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's anybody else in this field who makes that shot. There might not be another person in the world who makes that shot. The angle when you looked at it made no sense. There was no way that he could get an inside roll. He needed an inside roll to score, but the angle didn't work to get an inside roll and the double. He just threw it hard enough that the rock just went forward after. Like it sort of lurched forward after it made contact with the Bottcher stone. That shot was incredible.
Incredible. And it looked like, it went by and maybe like was going so fast it blew the Bottcher stone just by the wind. It ticked it so little.
Yeah.
And then Morris had enough wherewithal to be with it and sweeping it back. Great shot, game-saving shot.
Yep.
I thought the game was over. I was getting ready to go to bed thinking, okay, this is it. Bottcher's going to win.
Yep.
And I went, oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's against 5, right? There's no chance he was going to give up 5. Because if he rolls out, it's probably still it's 4, but like the game's
3
over.
or 4. Yeah, it's over.
But it's one of those shots that, you're just glad if you're on that team that you have Kevin Cooey.
Yeah. And that's the kind of shot that he can make, that he can, keep his team in the game.
Yeah.
Right. They can miss a bunch of shots before that and he can sort of bail them out.
Yeah.
Bail them out with 1.
Yeah. And actually that shot, Scott, is what made the 10th end so interesting the whole way through, that Kevin Cooey was never set up great through the middle of the end a little bit, but they got a miss out of BJ Neufeld, and then Darren Molding wasn't sharp in the 10th end. He looked pretty amped up in the 10th end to get a chance to win that game. And Brendan Bottcher is able to make his 2. And the whole time, though, as you're thinking about this, at least for me, even when Bottcher has 2 stones in and the angles don't look like Kevin Cooey could get both of those out and score 3 and win the game, I was never fully convinced that Kevin Cooey couldn't do it just because he has pulled off those type of shots. We had seen it 20 minutes before, that he had pulled something off that I don't think anyone saw. Certainly the broadcasters didn't. And so that, like, even when like the physics would make no sense whatsoever, and Kevin Cooey, after Brendan Bottcher's last shot, makes the hit, and you're looking at it and thinking, okay, I'm a normal human being. I don't see how this could possibly work at all. But Kevin Cooey is not a normal human being and pulls this kind of stuff off somehow. But this one was a little bit too much for him. But that's what made that 10th end kind of more interesting, to me at least, is that even when I'm looking at the angles, I'm trying to think, how does Kevin Cooey see this?
And that's hard because you're not him, right? So like even in our position, trying to think like him, having watched him curl so long and sort of saying, okay, how is he seeing it? We can't do it because that's sort of the curling brain that he has, which is so advanced, right? One of the things I really liked was, I guess we might talk a little bit about the time clock. They were running very low. I think they were at 47 seconds when it was his turn to throw his last.
Yeah, so the final time when they conceded, and that's when the clock stopped, 11 seconds.
Yeah, so I saw him, with his like fist on his cheek, looking around. And the boys are saying, I don't see anything, Koo. And he said, keep looking.
Keep looking. Yeah.
And I thought that's the embodiment of him as a curler, right?
Yeah.
Keep looking.
Keep looking.
There's something there where there's got to be. And at the end of the day, there wasn't. But, the sort of determination that they play with, I think, is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Very impressive. I mean, he won 4 Briers, and for the first, I don't know, what is he now, 40 something? So for the first 10 years of his career, he had to go through Kevin Martin and Randy Ferbey. So, he's a guy who grew up in this environment of having to go through top level players. And there was almost this knock on him when he won his first Brier in 2010 that, the only reason he even got there is because Martin was at the Olympics. And certainly he has proven that criticism at that time was nonsensical. And obviously one of the greatest now in Canadian history, and a guy who he's not going anywhere.
No, he's not. He's 45, Sean.
Okay. So yeah, so run it back 20 years or 25 years when he's starting up as coming out of juniors. His growing up in the sport in Alberta is trying to get through Ferbey in the years where we had the boycott, and then the boycott's over, Martin's back, and they were that powerhouse, and that's what he was trying to get through. And it's one of these things where there was a lot of talk, Mike McEwen, he can't get out of Manitoba. Well, that's because Jeff Stoughton's there, and Manitoba's pretty damn good. And going through that push of trying to have to get through those top level teams at the local level isn't always a bad thing. And he went through it, got through it, and now is really the established top guy certainly in Alberta, toss up in the country, maybe, and certainly like top 4 in the world, undisputably. And then, I'll let you have your pick of the top 4 teams in the world, and I'm happy with whoever's left over.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so Scott, on the other side, of course, Brendan Bottcher does win. As we said, first win for him and the squad out of the Saville Center in Edmonton. Scott, what's amazing to me is that the last 6 Briers have had 3 teams make the final, or 3 skips make the final. Bottcher, Gushue, Gushue. Each of them have played in 4 finals. Bottcher, of course, has the most losses of those teams with the 3 losses. But when we look at this team, the progress of them over this quadrennial, they came through the pre-trials to get to the trials in Ottawa in 2017. They had made the Brier that year, their first Brier. And now, Scott, every year they've gotten better and better. Even in those losses, their record through the week has gotten better, and the scoring differential has been better. Their shooting percentage has gone up. This is a team that has managed to continue its ascent over the past 4 years. Very impressive performances from them. And as you said, everyone sort of universally seems to like them, recognize that they're good guys. I know for me, first time I ever had a media credential at an event, Darren Moulding it was the mixed Canadian championship. He won the event as the skip and gave a lot of time to the 3 media people who were there. He was very generous and gracious with his time. So I've always kind of thought, nice guy for doing that in that setting. And certainly he's been a lot of fun on social media and a good presence in the sport. So it is nice to see for those 4 guys. And I don't really know what else there is to say about this team other than I'm impressed by their ability to be resilient and to continue to come back from the losses and continue to get better.
Yeah, for sure. It's never easy to deal with adversity in any sport, in life even. But what is the saying is that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And that seems to be true for this team. They, like you say, they've been through a lot of the trials and tribulations. Their first time at the Brier, I think, went 3-8, if not maybe 4-7.
No, it was 3-8.
Oh, geez, I should have just gone with my gut. And they took that as a learning opportunity, came back a couple of years later, and like you say, they sort of the way that Cooey had to battle through Alberta and come up to become what he is now. We've seen Bottcher the last few years have to battle through Alberta. It's been helped a little more by the Team Canada inclusion in the Brier, affording him that opportunity. The wild card too got him into the Brier 1 year, but they've taken those opportunities when they've gotten them and put in a lot of hard work, and it's paid off. But Sean, I think we all know the reason they won this week. It's because of the socks.
Oh,
right?
The socks. Yeah. Yeah. I tweeted out that I very much look forward to Vic's essay next year about the socks. It's going to be great.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I'm only partially joking, but when your ankles are warm, you can concentrate a lot more on the task at hand, right?
That's why I wear baseball.
Body's not divided.
I wear baseball socks that go up to my knee when I play. Don't like having a cold ankle, cold Achilles, anything like that. It's not good.
Are you there?
Yeah.
I don't hear you at all.
Oh, your phone rang.
Yeah, for the last 20 seconds, I haven't heard you at all.
That's because I haven't been talking.
Okay. Well, I shut my phone down.
Oh, okay. It also said you were offline for a minute or for a second.
Okay, that's probably why I couldn't hear you.
All right.
So I don't know what your cue was.
I was just saying that I wear high socks because cold ankles and cold Achilles are bad news.
Yeah, Sean, they are, because you never know when you might rupture an Achilles.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but that Kevin Durant looked pretty painful. In 2019.
Yeah, it doesn't look like fun.
No good.
So that, of course, did play a part in the narrative. Scott, I think the bigger thing that had a lot to do with their victory was their win over Matt Dunstone in the semifinal on a crazy-ish run back, 20-foot angle run back from about the 10 o'clock position, 10, 11 o'clock position above the house into the 4-foot to get the 2 that they needed in the 10th end to win the semifinal game. I think that had a little more to do with it than the socks. Now, don't come at me, people, but I'm that's my hot take, that the shot to win the semifinal was more important than the socks. What do you think?
Wow, Sean, that's a scorching hot take. Oh. I don't know how you can justify it, but yeah, we talked about that shot a little on our show yesterday that we did. That shot isn't as hard as it seems, I think, for a team of this caliber. Once you've got the angle figured out and where you need to hit the rock, then it's just sort of about getting the line call right to hit the rock where you've got to hit it.
Yeah.
And throwing it so that it has a chance, right? You don't want to dump it out or anything like that. But the way that he was playing all week, it wasn't that difficult a shot for him. I don't think. He called it, he expected to make it, and he made it.
Sure did.
And when somebody does that, it's heartbreaking for the other team, but you can't do anything other than say, good shot, man. Yeah, and shake your head and cry a bit, whatever.
Tip your cap a little bit to the other team. I think what was that, so that game kind of mirrored a little bit, or I guess the final mirrored the semifinal. Very tentative in the first half and even into the second half of the game. Neither team really going too hard. And for as much as the shot in 10 was a great shot, and I think the signature shot of this victory week for the Bottcher team, if I'm putting together highlight packages of their win this week, there's nothing really in the game last night that stands out for that. It's the shot in the 10th end of the semi that's that like big moment of the week in retrospect, given that they won. But for the whole game, there was a moment, I think it was in the 8th end, where things got like really bonkos. And just seeing how hard Bottcher was going to score 2 at that point, where he raised a Dunstone rock into his shot stone in the 4-foot on a kind of similar angle, actually, into the 4-foot. And basically what he was able to do was kind of push the shot stone over off the pin to the right a little bit to basically lock it in so that it couldn't go anywhere. And that was one of those shots too, that just kind of like Cooey, that signals that this guy sees things differently. Like there is not a rec player in the world who is going to raise in the opponent's stone into the 4-foot into their shot rock. There are very few elite teams that I think would have tried to do that. It was one of these moves that just stands out to you. And I tweeted this earlier in the week on the first Cooey Bottcher game, but like these guys are just playing on a totally different level. I'm not even convinced it's the same sport that the rest of us play when you see stuff like that.
Yeah. And the problem with seeing stuff like that as a rec player is then you go to the club and you try it and you fail miserably. And then you realize just how special these kinds of shots are. Like I say, that's a very routine shot for a team like Brendan Bottcher. And I really think it is. But when you go out and try it yourself, you realize like, oh, it's not simple for me. It's just the extra level these guys are playing on, like you say.
Yeah.
So you feel sad for Dunstone?
Well, this is interesting. We talked about this on the Broomstack on Sunday afternoon after that semifinal game. And I don't know, like for as nice as it is to like, I guess for Team Bottcher to win, I don't know if I feel good for them. I mean, my life's the same as it was before, they won it. Good for them. And I kind of feel similarly for Matt Dunstone and his team. I would have felt the same if they had won, as I feel Bottcher wins, I think. For them though, Scott, I do think that, and I said this on the show yesterday, that was the best Braden Moskowy game I've ever seen. And I don't care what the percentage says, because I'm sure the percentage would not indicate that was the best game he's ever played. But that was such an impressive performance to me as someone who thinks a lot about team dynamics and probably overanalyzes the interaction between the players. And I was critical of Moskowy earlier in the week in a game where they got blown out, and it felt like really the whole team had given up. You can almost see it in the line calls sometimes that they didn't really care anymore. And I'm not crazy with that kind of stuff. But in that game yesterday, he was so good. He was like, I was as impressed with him yesterday as I was with Reed Carruthers last year, where I was skeptical of the team going in for that particular reason. And there was just moments in there where like at one point he overthrew a rock and Myers and Kidby didn't have to sweep it. It ended up being in an okay spot, but he's coming down, he's joking with them like, hey, I'm just an unselfish guy. I didn't want you to sweep anymore. Like those are those little things that to me as an observer, I think those are the type of things you need to be a consistent winning team. You can't, when you miss a shot or you overthrow a shot a little bit, it's okay to be upset, but having those little moments of levity, particularly in a high stress situation, I was so impressed by that. And I said this on the show yesterday, and I think I'm going to stick with it. I will not be surprised if come the final Sunday of November, they're standing on top of a podium, putting on a Team Canada jacket and making plans to go to Beijing.
Yeah. And scheduled to be the home team there, in November. I think it might be a little premature for that. I know they've won a Grand Slam and, 2 bronze medal wins at the Brier.
Yep.
But you kind of have to climb that mountain first, right? And juniors is a great introduction, but it's not the big time. That said, we did see, Brad Gushue win without having won a Brier. We saw Cheryl Bernard win. We saw Shannon Clybrink win in 2006 too.
Yep.
So I guess it's possible. I just think that, that being 15 years ago versus today, the change in the sport, I think there's too many top dogs for them to have to go through this year, but 4 years hence, it's definitely in the cards for this team.
Yeah, so very impressive. The other thing I'll say about them, though, Scott, when we look at the progression, that last year they were in the 1-2 game, and this year they finished in second place officially with the tiebreak over Brendan Bottcher. That's why they had the hammer in that semifinal. So same position this year as last year, finishing second through the round robin play. But I think it was a much more impressive way through. They lost 3 games last year. They lost 3 games this year through the round robin.
Yeah.
One more win this year, obviously, with the extra game and the same losses. But the losses, or excuse me, the wins this year, they weren't as close. They weren't as at the buzzer. They didn't need as many big miracle shots. They just went out and beat people. And yeah, they had a couple losses and a couple bad losses at that. But that was a more sustainable type of beating people than the miracle shot at the end. And yeah, it's nice to have that when you need it. But this week he didn't need it when they were winning, because they just crushed people when they had to. And so I think this was a better Brier for them than 2020. And if they can continue that progression, I'm almost excited to see what this team is going to be like come November. Now they have to get there. They don't have a spot in the trials yet. Their loss yesterday opened up another spot for the pre-trial event. I think they'll be the favorite going into that. And then if they somehow don't get to that, then they have the pre-trials themselves. So they have 2 shots to get in, and I would expect them to get through. So it'll be interesting, though, once we get to November, how things shake out, what type of a season we have leading up to that, to see if they can be in top form.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. And like you say, the pre-trials will be where they're going to attempt to get their spot right in. If they don't get it, they'll still have a chance at the pre-trials, which I would put them as a pretty heavy favorite to get through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Team Dunstone, I want to have a good showing. I obviously want to win the Olympic berth for sure. But I think realistically, if they think about it in their heads, their peak is probably the next quadrennial.
Yeah, I mean, they're all young enough. I think Myers is the oldest one.
And we talk about skips, really coming into their own in their 30s, right? Whereas peak athletic performance is usually somewhere in your 20s for most sports. But for curling, for a skip, just the reps as a skip, the strategic thinking, the seeing shots that maybe nobody else sees, the Kevin Cooey of it all, right?
Right.
It comes with experience.
Yep. No question. And I think, Scott, as we move forward into the sport, it'll be curious for me to see, who comes out of this Manitoba milieu, if I can make up a word, of young teams. You got the JT Ryans of the world. You got Jacques Gauthier. So 2 recent junior champions. Does that in the next quadrennial, does one of those teams, or perhaps form a super team in Manitoba, come up, challenge McEwen, challenge Gunnlaugson, and emerge out of there? Does Tyler Tardy, how does his jump go into the men's game over the next 4 years? Who's going to emerge out of that? It'll be curious to see. But as we sit right now with that sort of uncertainty of who's coming out of the junior levels and who will make that jump, I am okay as we sit here in the middle of March 2021 if the next decade of big Brier playoff games are Dunstone versus Bottcher. I'll sign up for that right now.
Yeah, I think we'd get definitely some good games. What we saw from Team Bottcher, for example, right, was they came to the trials in 2017 through the pre-trials. They didn't have a particularly good week. I think they were like around 500. I think he played 8 games that week, right?
7, 3 and 4, I think. I'll look it up while you.
It was definitely 8 games.
Okay.
Because There's 9 teams there. And so what I want to see at this trials this year is who is that Bottcher team this year, right?
Yeah.
Is it Dunstone that comes in, sort of looking to take the next step? I would argue no, because they were there.
He's played
last time.
Yeah.
But like, who in the field do you think is that team coming in? Because like we talked about before this event, not a lot of rookies, right?
Nope.
It was basically the Territories and Yukon that were the rookie teams.
Yeah. I think 17 players overall.
So yeah, is it Tyler Tardy's team that maybe this year was the year we would have seen them, starting to play more on tour, getting into form to become that, maybe team that comes through the pre-trials next year?
Yeah.
To the trials? I think that's sort of the most likely. The Jacques Gauthier and the team from Manitoba, I think they're still too young.
Well, for this year.
Well, I know for this year, but I think they're still too young to even contend in 4 years. They might be in the mix, but I don't think they'll be at the top. The question is, though, like, do the teams we see at the top now, how many of them are done?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a discussion we can certainly have once we get there, but you just look at the ages of guys and when people tend to step away. And Cooey's in his 40s, Mike McEwen's in his 40s, Brad Gushue's in his 40s, I think.
Yes, he's 40.
So, you're not looking at guys who are going to be around for multiple cycles again, in all likelihood. Brad Jacobs has talked about what that situation will be, whether or not they'll stay together and the challenges that they've had. John Epping's been around for a while, and he's got Lang on his team who's also been around for a while. How long do they want to keep playing at that level? How much for someone like Lang is mixed doubles going to be potentially the focus for him? Who knows? And so all that speculation does create a vacuum. I think once we get through this cycle, I don't think there's spots for November for any team that wasn't at this Brier, if I'm being
Probably
honest.
Probably not.
Maybe Flash, because he's in the pre-trials.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Really? He's in the pre-trials?
According to the Curling Canada release, yeah. He got enough points.
On his own? Anyway.
Well, combined with the other guys he's with, yeah.
Right. Well, we'll see.
So, we'll have to see how it all comes together. But yeah, the Dunstone Bottcher potential of a great rivalry over the next decade. And we saw a great game yesterday. All right, let's talk about some of the other teams, Scott, and some of the major stories through the week. I think the biggest story, arguably, Wayne Middaugh's bionic leg.
Yes.
What is in the leg? This was great. And I love how much fun they had with it too. Online, Carly Howard, apparently Glenn Howard just left the password on the fridge. So she was controlling the social media. They had a lot of fun with it. The fact that this was a cool comeback story. Hadn't played competitively in a while. He did have the horrible accident a few years ago. Fortunately, he was able to recover from it and seems to be back to normal in all aspects of his life. Like, he can golf, he can curl, he can drink Caesars. Those are the 3 things he cares about in this world. So it was nice to see that he was able to get back to playing, get back into the hack. And Scott, I think when we look at this week, there are a bunch of moments where it would have been cool to have people there. But I think some of the shots that Wayne Middaugh made at the end of the week or throughout the week to win games, those would have been some of the biggest cheers. I think people would have gone nuts for that story in the building.
No doubt, Sean. A fan favorite from a long time, won in 1998 as a skip. Hasn't been back since, 2013 or 2014. So yeah, like, really nice for him to get back in the saddle. One more ride. He did what he could. He played really, really, really well. And at the end of the day, he sort of ran out of steam, right? Got caught up playing a little too cute, maybe. the last 2 games.
Yeah,
maybe the front end was getting a little, maybe
tired.
not just the front end, but the rest of the guys. It felt like they were sort of feeling the moment a bit.
A little bit. And there was the unfortunate situation on Saturday where the rocks were sanded overnight, papered, as they call it, and they didn't know about it. Some teams knew about it, other teams didn't. This was a major thing on social media on Saturday, and the Howard team was upset about it. I think rightfully so. And the issue wasn't that the rocks were papered. The issue is that not every team knew about it. And Curling Canada half apologized for it and said that they will review their procedures on what to do. And I think the big issue for Glenn Howard and the team was that they threw their draw to the button before the game, which determines hammer, without having known this. Gushue knew it. He won the draw to the button. He had the hammer in the first end. And that did kind of get in the way, I think, of the game a little bit, unfortunately. And yeah, they weren't able to come back to win that game. And then they lost to Cooey on Saturday night.
Well, I mean, I understand that they'd be mad they weren't told, but didn't they practice for 7 minutes with the rocks before they threw the draw to the button?
They did.
Wouldn't they have noticed, like, hey, these are running different?
I don't know what to tell you, man. They were upset.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I would be upset too. But my being upset would maybe come before I threw my draw to the button, where I was like, did you guys do anything to these rocks? They're really different.
Yeah. Like, or they just thought the ice was different. I don't know. I don't know what happened in the practice.
Yes. No.
I just know that they were upset. And yeah, so now we'll see what happens with that team. They have a spot in the pre-trials as well. So we'll see them. And now with 2 spots at those pre-trials instead of 1, of course, if there had only been 1, it would have meant that Dunstone or Howard had won this event, or somebody else. I guess Laycock could have won. But at this point, we have those 2 spots. I would say those 2 teams would be the favorites going into those pre-trials.
I would have to say so.
All right. Yeah. So elsewhere across the sheets, in terms of some sad demises of teams, James Grattan, Scott, got off to such a good start, and just Greg Skogie got Greg Skogied on Thursday night.
Gonna Skogie?
Yeah, he couldn't pull it out for James Grattan. He had a spot teed up for a tiebreaker on Friday morning, but Vic just used his no tiebreaker pixie dust, and James Grattan falls. But it was fun to see them. Got a couple big wins over the course of the week with McEwen beat Jacobs. Really fun run for that team. Always good to see them there. And this was one of those years where people weren't playing. He was able to play a bunch this year. And you kind of saw that early in the week where he got out to a great start.
And man, this is really hard because
he's your best friend. He got you on the plane.
He beat the teams that he needed to beat at the beginning of the week, right? It was sort of there.
Yep.
And yeah, that's really a crushing loss, to lose to the Northwest Territories there. Maybe some bad luck to get them on the last draw when maybe they had figured the ice out a little more than they would have at the beginning. But I think you could say that about any of the teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he was happy knowing that he had them to look forward to, right? We penciled him in for 5 wins. We gave him that win.
We did. Yeah. After he beat Jacobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, really tough one for the Jimmy the Kid.
Yeah.
That said, I don't think that they would have, run the championship pool or anything. But so I mean, it would have been nice for them, an extra $12,500.
$12,000.
But yes,
Greg Skogie cost him $12,000.
I hope that after the game, he made Greg Skogie buy him $12,000 worth of drinks.
Of course, he didn't actually, because it would have been a tiebreaker, and then it would have been Jacobs and the New Brunswick team in a tiebreaker on Friday morning. Would have had to see what happened. But yeah, he beat Laycock, he beat McEwen, he beat Jacobs. lost his last 3, Gunnlaugson, Howard, and Skokiel in a row. So tough finish for New Brunswick. Scott, let's stay out east. Greg Smith made his return to the Brier. A couple great hot mic moments. Favorite one for me is the roundhouse shot that he made that he prefaced by saying, we're down 7-1, who cares? Just a great force. You saw this moment where he played John Epping and they had the pride flag between the two of them. The first time openly gay skips who played each other at the Brier. And we've talked on this show about how important representation is in all of its various forms. So that was a nice moment to see, and nice to see it acknowledged after the game as well, and promoted on social media. The broadcast didn't make much about it, but it was nice to see it afterwards. So a nice moment there. And a guy, Scott, who knows how many times we'll see Greg Smith at a Brier, given the situation in Newfoundland and Labrador. But he's a guy that when he's there, he's going to put on a show.
Yeah. And you know what, Sean? You'll see him next week or this week at the mixed doubles.
Yeah.
He's playing, representing Newfoundland and Labrador there at the mixed doubles. And I think you're so right about representation. And I've heard it from so many different people in so many different ways, especially this year, as we've talked a little bit more about how important it is for people to see themselves in who they see portrayed in the media, be it somebody of a different race, of a different language, of a different sexual orientation, whatever it is. You know, being able to say, hey, I'm like that person. If they can do it, I can do it, is a really, really, really important thing. And so, like you say, it was nice to see that afterwards. It would have been nice to be mentioned on TV. I'm not sure why not. We do praise TSN for a lot of what they do. I think they sort of missed that one, but good to see afterwards. Absolutely.
Well, it could be one of those things even that TSN didn't even think about it in the moment. Because, I mean, John Epping has talked about how he's like the guy who has to come out all the time. Because like no one really talks about it. It's just sort of accepted that it's John Epping, which is nice that it's gotten to that point of like, he's John. Mm-hmm. He's not gay curler John. He's just John. Right. And so it's possible that nobody even thought of that in the moment because like, oh, John's playing Greg Smith. Okay. Like it's not front of mind. Right. So, but it was nice to see the Curling Canada acknowledge it afterwards. The only real bummer of the week, as we talked about it throughout the week, that the Newfoundland Canada game was late and therefore not really eligible for a TV game, sadly.
Yeah. And our friends out east had to stay up super late to watch it.
Yeah. But of course, afterwards, Greg Smith tweeted that he was kind of happy it wasn't on TV because it was a bit of a blowout once we got there.
Bit of a rough one.
Yeah. All right. Elsewhere, let's stay in Newfoundland Labrador. Brad Gushue with a somewhat unceremonious exit on Saturday night. Just didn't have it in a game that he needed to win. Could have eliminated Brendan Bottcher from the playoff hunt, but just one of those games that, it's, for as much as we talk, Scott, these teams are on a different level, and certainly Brad Gushue is in that category. It's kind of like at golf in the U.S. Open. It's nice to see that they're also human beings, and I think anyone who's ever stepped on the ice can relate to the game that Gushue had Saturday night. Obviously not the way you want to go out when you're defending your championship, but overall for the week, they didn't quite have the greatest feel for the ice, as you could hear them talk about during their games. So it's not surprising when we got to Saturday that they didn't necessarily make the playoffs. A little surprising in how they didn't make the playoffs, but one of those weeks that I think this team, they'll just put it behind them and move on to the next event.
I think so. Yeah. So I was doing some math, Sean, before the show. Like I always love to do, doing math, really fun. And we've talked in the past about the hammer factor as a pretty good stat to show the strength of the team during the week. So the correlation between hammer factor and wins is usually pretty strong. Brad Gushue had the best hammer factor this week, their team at 0.29. So the higher is the better. And what the hammer factor is the hammer efficiency.
Yeah.
Which is the number of ends in which you score multiple points minus the number of ends you've had stolen, or the percentage of stolen ends against you. So the steal defense percentage.
Okay.
And so obviously the steal defense, you want to be really low because you want very few ends stolen. against you. And so, yeah, for Gushue, 41% on his hammer efficiency. It's the third highest in the field.
Yeah.
Behind Epping and actually Mike Fournier. I probably could have sorted this by games, but I didn't. And then only 6 steals against all week in the 12 games. So
yeah, and weren't 3 of them in the last game?
I think they were in the last game against Bottcher, right? Because it got out to 7-0.
Yeah, it got out of hand pretty fast.
Yeah. So pretty tough for Gushue there. I think in a different year against maybe slightly weaker teams, they would have been fine to make the playoffs, and they would have been in the tiebreaker for that 4th playoff spot at the very least, right? Had the event been in a normal year. So tough for them to not make the playoffs at all. I think that if you'd picked Gushue, Cooey, and Bottcher for the playoffs, that would have been very smart because, like you say, they've been the 3 teams in the last 6 finals. But disappointing for them to not go home with any hardware from this week.
Yeah, so I'm not going to bleed too much for Brad Gushue. He's won 3 of the last 5. He's fine.
He's fine.
His life will be fine. But yeah, not the greatest exit there. In terms of other not great exits, Scott, let's talk about Manitoba real quick. And Gunnlaugson and Mike McEwen, a couple disappointing performances for the teams out of Manitoba. Of course, Mike McEwen doesn't make it into the championship pool. Gunnlaugson goes over once he gets into the championship pool. And this prompted a discussion on the Saturday Broomstack with Jonathan and Dean, where we said maybe Manitoba could be open to one of these young teams, where if they come together, who knows? Right? Maybe somebody can come up and start to nip these guys, or at least nip on their heels a little bit. But this is a couple now disappointing performances in a row out of Manitoba. It's been a while since Manitoba's been a legit threat. I would say throughout this quad, Manitoba hasn't really had a great sniff at a title. So it'd be curious to see what happens. Again, both these teams likely we'll see them at the trials once we get into November. But it's sort of almost like tires spinning in mud right now for the teams when they get to the Brier.
Yeah, and especially for the McEwen rink, we talked a little bit during the week about they're the most disappointed team and probably the most disappointing story of this event. To not even get out of their pool, we sort of the spot that we had reserved for them went to the Howard and Middaugh rink. So, definitely not what they wanted. And we talked a lot about, how their team dynamic had been so good last year. We really didn't see that this year. I say Mike McEwen's body language when he's playing badly is just really low energy. He's walking around with his broom on his shoulder. You're kind of watching them convinced that they're not going to win. Yeah. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. And that's what we didn't see last year, even when they were struggling. So
yeah. And then for Gunnlaugson, really disappointing. He gets out 5-0. I guess you could argue that he played the 5 easiest games in those first 5.
I mean, he beat Bottcher in the opening draw. But again, opening draw, Bottcher basically gave him the game in the 10th end.
Yes. He didn't really beat Bottcher. Bottcher lost.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
And then, coming down the stretch, he loses to Jacobs, Laycock, Howard, beats Epping, then loses to Gushue, Cooey, and Dunstone. So not a great run down the stretch, losing 6 of his last 7 games.
Yeah, and we talked about this at the beginning of the show tonight, but also during the week, that the way that he's playing, the strategy requires, that little margin for error.
Yeah, 100%. So let's just quickly, Scott, other teams, Mike Fournier was a lot of fun. They had a nice run. Couldn't quite make it into that championship pool, but, very similar to what we saw in the Scotties. A lot of people had fun with the team out of Quebec. So it's always nice to see when these provinces that don't usually threaten, and certainly the past couple of years we've seen Quebec not really be a factor at all in either the Scotties or the Brier. But here in the Brier, he put some fear into some folks, did Mike Fournier. So a nice run there. It was fun to see Scott McDonald there with the Jamie Murphy team. They struggled early in the week with their communication, but ultimately they end up at 4-4. They have a pretty good run. I'm in the tank for Eddie McKenzie for just reasons. We saw them push Brad Gushue to the limit with Tyler Smith skipping a game. Look out for Tyler Smith as the men skip coming out of PEI as we move forward. Greg Skogie had a nice win. He was a factor when we talk about the playoffs. Tough week for Mickelson and Peter Mackey. And I think overall, Scott, it was a fun week. The only other thing that I can think, because you were not on the show with us on Saturday, do you have thoughts about the Laycock quote unquote scandal?
The broom slam?
Yeah.
No, I like broom slamming.
Okay. All right.
That we talked about that on Friday, I think.
Oh, right. That happened on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Yes. My apologies. So if you didn't hear about it, yeah, Steve Laycock slammed his broom and caused a 45-minute delay because it damaged the ice. And there was a bit of a controversy over that. Perhaps connected. Brendan Bottcher won the Sportsmanship Award.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. It could very well be connected to that event.
Yeah, could be
on
some
Thursday
causation.
night.
Could be some causation there.
Could be. And I think we said and maybe tweeted about it, but Steve Laycock is like the last person that you would expect to get mad and slam his broom and break the ice, right? Like he's
100%.
So even keeled all the time. So kind of unfortunate that it would happen to him.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, he's not the top list of guys who you think that would happen. So an unfortunate break. Maybe there does need to be some adjustment to the rules as broom slamming becomes more common. And so some sort of way in which we could avoid that situation moving forward, but not a big deal. It's certainly not as big of a deal as it was made out to be on social media. So Scott, I think
Sean,
we've talked about all the teams, and even in a very passing form.
Yeah, I think we did. We did a good job in doing the talk to every contestant at the Survivor finale.
Yeah, there you go. So Scott, what is going to stand out for you when you think back on the 2021 Brier?
Honestly, I'm going to remember Wayne Middaugh.
Okay.
I think more than anything. The second would be, this was Bottcher's first win. But I think the Wayne Middaugh story is the story of the week.
Okay. I think that certainly is fair. I honestly will remember this as like the awkward end of game Brier. Nobody really knowing what to do. Sometimes we'll tap broom, sometimes we won't. Then they started shaking hands yesterday, and I was like, "Oh no! Like, what is happening?" And then, and like with the Scotties, it just felt weird at the end of the game when they're excited and they're happy, they're yelling, and it's just silent, and you can hear their echoes of them cheering. And I felt bad for the Carrie Anderson team. I feel bad for the Brendan Bottcher team that they missed that moment of revelry with the crowd there. And certainly in Alberta, an all Alberta final, that place would have been hopping if there would have been people. Of course, if none of this had happened, it wouldn't have been in Alberta, but you know what I mean, that two Alberta teams in a final in Alberta, that building would have been hopping.
Absolutely, it would have been.
All right.
Miss out on that for sure.
Too bad. So Scott, let's revisit our picks real quick.
So let's end the show. We're pretty good. Right? Nothing more to do.
So before the event, during our preview, we each picked playoff teams and then our winner. Scott, do you remember who you picked for your playoff teams?
I remember picking Brad Jacobs to win.
Yeah, you did.
And I think I also picked Gushue and Cooey.
So you picked Northern Ontario to win. You picked Alberta to finish second, and then you picked a Gushue Cooey tiebreaker game.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So for that, you
I mean,
get, I guess, a 1.5.
I mean, Gushue would have been in a 4th place tiebreaker.
But
with Northern Ontario, I think. So no, that's wrong. But pretty good. Sean, who do you remember who you picked?
I do. So I had Northern Ontario in the playoffs as well. I also had Kevin Cooey in the playoffs, but my winner pick from Alberta, Team Brendan Bottcher.
Wow, Sean, you picked the winner.
Pick the winner. Don't do that very often, but got this one right. I believe what I said on the show is that I don't really know this team. I don't really have any connection to the team, but I don't think I could watch them lose a 4th one. Like for anyone, I don't care who it is. Like I don't want Matt Dunstone to go and lose another semifinal. It's hard to watch sometimes, just the repeated struggles of a team. And so for that reason, I picked them. And I was correct.
Hey, good on.
Yeah, good job by me. So there you go. So those are our picks. I beat Scott, of course, because that's what happens on the show. My picks are just regularly better.
Well, la-di-da for you.
Yeah. So that'll do it for our 2021 Brier recap. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And thank you so much for everybody who joined us and hung out on the post-game broomstack every afternoon through the Brier. We had a lot of fun doing it. It was really great to get to interact with everybody. The chat was hopping some days, Scott.
Oh, it was really fun. Yeah, it was nice to see some questions, talk about some things, some joking going on. It was good.
Yeah, and some stuff that we wouldn't have thought about on our own that came up through the chat that we had some really fun discussions on.
Yeah, and thanks to all of our guests who came on throughout the week too to talk about the games. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. So if you want, all the videos are still there over on Facebook, facebook.com/Game of Stones podcast. If you want to check some of them out, some of the topics are pretty evergreen, I think. The first 10 minutes or 5-10 minutes of each one is about what just happened. Then we get into, in a lot of cases, pretty evergreen topics. If you want to go check out some of those broom stack, and I'll put together a best of the Brier broom stacking to release at some point in the future. So you can look out for that. Elsewhere, do subscribe to this feed if you have not yet. Wherever it is you get your podcast, do the likes, ratings, comments, all that stuff keeps us going, helps other people find the show. You can also follow along on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at Game of Stones Pod. Scott is at Scott Lakes TV, and I am at The Sean Graham. And do head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com for all our past episodes. I have a blog post over there about how the pre-trials is going to work in Olympic qualification. And now that we're going to have a sense, or not even a sense, we will know which countries have qualified for the Olympics once we get to the end of the Women's World Championship. I'll update that post, assuming that Canada qualifies in those two disciplines, which we'll have to see.
Yes.
It's not unheard of for Canada to miss the playoffs at a World Championship. It's rare, but not unheard of.
That's right. And it'll be weird, maybe weird, but it'll be cool to watch Team Bottcher and see how they fare at their first event on the world stage.
Yeah. Fortunately for them, if you want to put it in a fortunate way, they've been in the bubble and a couple of them aren't going home. So, they'll have the experience where the other teams will have to get used to the bubble environment. And they just played a week of high-level games against some of the best teams in the world. Not all the other teams can say that.
That's right.
So they should be coming in ahead of the curve a bit with that. But we'll talk about all that once we get to the men's worlds. And of course, when you do get over to GameOfStonesPod.com, click on the merch tab. Scott has updated the merch offerings. We have black t-shirts. The black t-shirt is still available, but we switched out some of the other items. So now there are 2 different hues of a hoodie. There is a baseball tee and a toque. And like with the t-shirts, we're going to donate all the proceeds from these. The t-shirts will continue to donate the proceeds to Food Banks Canada. And for the new items, all proceeds to the Sandra Schmerler Foundation. So very excited for those. Part of the reason we did this is that I wanted a couple of new things for full disclosure. But we thought, hey, I could have ordered them through the sort of back channel of the site that we use to get them for myself, but we thought, hey, why not update, see if anybody else wanted some of the new merch. And again, we're just going to continue to donate the proceeds from them. So I ordered a hoodie and a toque, and I got confirmation of that. So I'm very excited to see them in person. But you can head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com/merch. No, just click on the merch tab, and then you'll find it.
Click on the merch tab.
Yeah, so just click on the merch tab, and everything's there. And Scott, you did all that.
Yeah, and I can try to create a slug Game of Stones pod/merch, but if that doesn't work, go through the main site and click on the merch tab.
So there you go. So that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this. Hope you enjoyed the Brier. Hope you enjoyed the games. It was overall, I think, a pretty fun week, but the fun and frivolity in Calgary is nowhere near ending. The Canadian Mixed Doubles Championship kicks off on Thursday. TSN going wall-to-wall-ish on their coverage. Kathy and Brian doing the whole thing. Vic's going home. He's getting a rest, which is probably good. And presumably Russ and Cheryl also are going to leave the bubble for a couple weeks, about a week and a half, I think they get at home before they all have to head back in for the Men's World Championship. So, Scott, we will be back later this week to talk about the mixed doubles. Are you excited?
So excited.
Yeah, there you go. That's the spirit, buddy. So look out for our preview of the mixed doubles. That'll be coming in the next day or so. But until then, thanks for listening, and keep your brooms on the ice, and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.